Welcome to With All Due Respect. This is a podcast for women over 40 who are looking for sane, frank advice about their health and wellness, especially through and after menopause. I'm Amanda Thebe, a personal trainer and nutrition coach, and the author of the best-selling book, Menopocalypse: How I Learned to Thrive During Menopause and How You Can Too. I'd love you to join me every week as I chew the fat with some fab guests on hot topics that directly impact you. I also know the power of conversation is lost, and there's nothing better than sitting down for a natter with your mate and putting the world to rights. And that's exactly what I'll be doing with this podcast. We'll really get to know my guests, warts and all. I've made it my mission to help you by exploding a few myths and presenting you with plain, simple facts. These inspiring conversations will hopefully empower you to be a healthy, strong, resilient bitch, just like me. Before we get started, don't forget to hit subscribe and leave a review, and then visit me at amandathebe.com. And now let's get started on today's show. Hi everyone, welcome back to With All Due Respect. Hi, I'm Amanda Thebe. I'm really excited today to have another Northern lass on the podcast with me, Jo Moseley. Jo is somebody who, we both followed each other for a while on social media. We just said we feel like we know each other. I think that's what social media does these days, right? But let me just tell you a little bit about Jo, and then I'll bring her in, and then we'll get into the episode today. So Jo is 58, single mum of 2 adult sons from North Yorkshire. So North Yorkshire is just a tiny bit south of where I'm from in County Cleveland. Alongside her lovely day job, she's also a writer, speaker, and podcast host, and she describes herself as a joy encourager, a beach cleaner, and midlife adventurer. And it's those last 2 things that we're going to sort of touch on today. Unfortunately, after her mum died and then experiencing a very difficult perimenopause, Jo was left feeling very broken, crying in supermarkets, and just needed to do something else. And Jo discovered the joy of moving for her physical, emotional, and mental health. She hikes, she does cold water dips all year round, and paddleboards. It eases her anxiety and it helps her sleep. In 2019, Jo became the first woman to paddleboard coast to coast across northern England. I mean, God, the water's so cold there, God. But she picked up litter and she did fundraising, and a film about her coast-to-coast SUP journey. SUP is stand-up paddleboard, by the way. We'll say that a lot through the show, I imagine. And it was a film called Brave Enough, A Journey Home to Joy. And it's been screened at prestigious film festivals to sell out online events. Her first book, Stand-Up Paddleboarding in Great Britain, Beautiful Places to Paddleboard in England, Scotland and Wales, was shortlisted for the best book of the year in the Great Outdoors Magazine Awards. Jo is enjoying and very grateful for her post-menopausal year and the freedom it brings to live life to the full. Oh my gosh, I couldn't agree more, Jo. I mean, I think that's a really great place to start, right? You're a post-menopausal woman like myself.
Yeah.
And life is good, hey?
It is. First of all, just such an honor to be chatting to you on your podcast. I know you have zillions of listeners, so thank you. And hello, everybody. Yeah, I think it is. I think the conversation can become very either or. Either your menopause, your perimenopause is fine or it's awful. But I think we should use the word and. It can be awful and then it can get better and then it can be great. I think we need to sort of have a more holistic view of the whole process. And actually postmenopausally, most of my symptoms have eased, and without me necessarily doing anything, they've eased. So yeah, it's a good time. Very grateful to be here, very grateful to be doing the things I do at 58.
Yeah, it's a really nice, as your name is healthy and happy 50 is Jo's handle. Yeah. And it's a really healthy, happy message to give women. And statistically, it's accurate as well. It's what we see. Yeah. And so we're not diminishing anybody's experience through perimenopause. Jo and I both had life-altering perimenopausal experiences. But we're both sort of trying to say, we're here, life is good, things get better, and, stay the course. And so, you unfortunately lost your mum around about the same time as well. So I can't even imagine what that felt like. And so what was the pivoting moment in your life that made you say, this can't go on, right? I can't go on feeling like this, doing the same old thing. How am I going to sort of take control again? Can you explain that to us? Because I bet you, somebody listening here has felt the same way. Not always the same circumstances, but it's like, this is stupid. This can't be how I live my life.
Yeah, exactly. So I had one really pivotal moment. I was in Tesco supermarket, big brand supermarket in Skipton in North England. And I was with my two sons. You have two sons. They were sort of 16 and 13. So this was like 10 years ago. It was after school and after work when everybody is hungry. You're hungry, you're tired, you're grumpy, you just want to get home. And we were shopping. My son had volunteered to do the food shopping for a thing called the Duke of Edinburgh Award. And so we were like counting how many portions of noodles, 16-year-old boys could have. And we were in the biscuit aisle of this big supermarket. And I just so vividly remember dropping the bags, leaning against the chocolate, looking at the chocolate biscuits and looking at this particular chocolate biscuit brand called Hobnobs and just bursting into tears and just saying to the boys, I can't do this anymore. I just can't do this. I can't cope. And I thought it was because I was a single mum, busy. I thought it was because both mum and dad were going through chemotherapy. So mum was having treatment for lymphoma and dad's had breast, bowel and skin cancer. And I just thought it was that. I just thought it was a 48-year-old lot. That's what happened in life. You were just tired and grumpy. But I just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. And it wasn't the first supermarket that I'd cried in. I'd cried a lot around that time. And I was.
Do you know what? I've cried in a supermarket too. Hands up, anyone listening. If you cried in the supermarket. Yeah.
It's just, exactly. And it's funny because when you are like that, there's often a woman who'll just look at you with real empathy and maybe just kind of touch your arm and say, it'll get better, whatever, And I just thought it was that. I didn't know. 10 years ago, I hadn't heard of the word perimenopause. What was that? And I didn't want to tell mum and dad because they were obviously working out their diaries to go to hospital. So I told a friend and I just thought, it's not usual that a woman should be crying in the supermarket on a regular basis. It's not usual that I'm in such pain, my joints and bones ache. It's not usual that I'm just not sleeping. So I told a friend and she said, how much exercise do you do? And I said, well, I spend all my weekends at the rugby pitch, but, on the side of the rugby pitch with the boys, don't do anything, just stand there cheering. And so she said, I've got an old indoor rowing machine and it might help you sleep. Now, in hindsight, I think this old indoor rowing machine was either going to the charity shop or the tip. But
she was very smart, wasn't she? Smart.
She was very clever. So it came to my house and this rickety old rowing machine in my little kitchen. And I just started with no technique or anything, just rowing. And within a couple of weeks, I was sleeping. And for me, sleep is the bedrock of all life. It's getting good night's sleep is like my job. Then it starts, 7 a.m. when I go out and get my sunlight and everything. And so I slept and then life just started to feel better. So that was a pivotal moment, was just crying in the supermarket. And I just reached rock bottom. And I'd been rock bottom before divorce and all that stuff. But this was a physical kind of rock bottom.
It was different, right? Yeah. I feel like I really struggle to describe how low it feels.
Yeah.
It's almost like, so I never felt suicidal with perimenopause. I did when I went on hormone therapy, actually, but that's a whole other story. But I never felt suicidal in perimenopause, but I would wake up every day wondering if I could even do the day again, if this was it. And I don't think there's very much lower you could go than that. And that's what I'm hearing from you. But to me, what I'm also hearing is one of the pivotal things that came from you crying in Tesco's over the Hobnobs, which is the name of your next book, is you reached out to a friend.
Yeah.
You needed not to feel isolated and alone with this, right? Yeah. I wish every woman would do that because we don't do it. We just soldier on and.
Yes. I owe her so much in that respect because I had been soldiering on for so long. And I think as well, I'd been through my divorce a few years before. And I know this sounds really silly, but I felt like I'd had my years of being the friend that had problems, and so there was a sense of, I just can't burden people again. I have to soldier on because they just don't want the Joe that's, oh, it's bad again. And that had been several years before, but I thought I'd had my quota that I could ask for friends to help. So I did soldier on until it was just at that terrible, terrible point. And I thought, I can't. I just, like you said, I can't go on. I simply can't go on. It's not fair on the boys. And it's not fair on me and anyone around me.
Okay, so from there, what's next? Because I'm assuming things didn't automatically get better from there, right? Because that's not what perimenopause is.
No. So I did start sleeping, and it started to just feel better, and lots of good things started happening. And then Mum died, and so a few months later at Christmas 2013. So that had been in May. She died in the December. And then I was hit by grief, and so it just, all of those, and trying to look after the boys, trying to look after my dad. And I went to bereavement counselling, which I can highly recommend. And the chap said to me, how do you feel? And I said, I feel like I'm in a rickety old boat on a lake, and my old life is the shoreline around the lake. And I'm standing in this boat waving my arms. And I want to get back there, but I don't know what to do. The waves keep, pushing the boat here and there. And he said, well, what do you think you need to do? And I said, I need to sit down and row back to the shore. And obviously I meant it metaphorically. But then I thought, right, I have this grief and pain within me. I need to do something with it. So I decided to row 1,000,000 meters, which is about Paris to Edinburgh, and a marathon and 2 half marathons in memory of my mum. And so that's what I did over the course of 8 months. And again, it was like this really concerted movement.
So are you talking about in your kitchen on the rickety old...
No, by this time, that had also died.
R.I.P.
R.I.P. I was now at a gym, and so I just went there every other night and rode 10,000 meters for 8 months. Sorted the boys' homework, sorted the tea, went down and rode. And what I realized was it was all about my mental well-being and helping me with the grief. And what I came to realize was that movement was something so different to what I'd grown up with. Probably like you, there was 2 reasons to move your body. One was to lose weight, and I took that in my teenage years very on board in the losing weight. But, you could just stop eating. So there was that option. And I say that with sensitivity and, disordered eating.
It was ingrained
in all of us. Yeah. And, it was the easiest option. And, I took it a little bit too far. Or to be competitive. And I'm not a natural sports person. The idea of being competitive doesn't really interest me. So those were the only 2 reasons you moved, literally. There was nothing else. I'd been so active as a child, but then active, moving, gymnastics, fun became sport and exercise and formal and all these things. But I just realized that there was so much to be had from moving after this process of the 1,000,000 meters and marathon. And it brought me joy, and it eased my anxiety. It eased everything. And so I went back in my, early 50s. So I rode the marathon just before my 50th birthday. So 26.2 miles on my bottom. And in memory of Mum on the first anniversary of her death. And I just realized that movement was just doing me the world of good. So I went back to sort of hiking and dipping in the sea. And then 2 or 3 years later, I started to learn to paddleboard. But it was all about just rekindling that joy and just the soothingness of movement, that it soothed that broken heart and that broken body.
And it looks to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you do a lot of this on your own, right? And I think that one of the things I find with a lot of women that don't know how to start again, they lack the motivation. I mean, your motivation really was because you couldn't get any lower, right? And you're like, I have to do something. And actually that can be an impetus. Unfortunately, we don't want women to get there, but a lot of women don't like to exercise on their own, and they always want to go with somebody else. And then if that person lets them down, they end up not going. So actually, I'm quite curious as to how you found like the fortitude to do it on your own, because that's a struggle for a lot of people, even though I actually am the lone. I love doing stuff on my own.
Yeah, I think it's because I think there's 2 or 3 reasons. One, I was so ingrained with school sports that I would let people down, that I brought that to this, that if I was on the team, I would be the one that would drop the ball or not be good enough. And so I thought, well, if somebody says, let's go for a run, well, they would be like so far in the distance that they'd have to wait for me, and that would be an inconvenience. So I would be an inconvenience to other people.
And it can be demoralizing as well, right?
And it can be demoralizing, yeah. And also, I think for me, it's so much of it has been my mental headspace, that actually just going off and doing something on my own just gives me that peace. Nobody needs me, nobody's saying, Mum, can you cook lunch? Nobody's, nobody needs me. And I think in the sandwich generation, as a single mum, there's just so many, and any parent or carer, there's just so many demands on your time that for me, it was a little escape, a little adventure. So I do swim with other people. I don't like big crowds. I do like maybe dipping with another girlfriend, and we can kind of just, be in the river and just having a little chat. And I love that. But actually, I did build a community on social media. And I think that's where a lot of my community has come from. So I'm just starting Couch to 5K for the 3rd time. I'm not naturally a runner, but I want to be able to run 5K happily again. And I put it on my stories, and a woman said, oh, I'm doing it. Can I do it with you? And so we just send each other pictures. Done week 1, so I have that community through social media, which I find really uplifting, really encouraging.
And, I think what I'm hearing as well is that, when you were in the place where you were and you were already having all of these pressures on you, like we all have felt it sometimes, this sandwich squeeze generation is a true phenomena that you, by going out on your own, were able to set the boundaries and your expectations without having to rely on somebody and without having to compete with anyone. And so that's sort of a really great message to anyone listening, because you don't always have to do group activities. I think there's a place for everyone in exercise. I've always said this. And for some people, buddying up with someone or going to a group fitness class or anything like that can be the impetus that gets them going. Some people, it's actually just ponying up some money and paying for a coach so that you don't waste that money. And for other people, it's just the idea that is a little bit of escapism. And that's it for me, truthfully. I get to be on my own, in my own headspace. I put my music on really loud. It's always ugly rage, angry music. And it's just for me. And I do stuff with my kids because they still want to, which makes me so happy. So I'm never going to say no to them, of course. But the online space, the online community space is actually a really great in-between. And I think that a lot of people are utilizing that right now. Yeah. And so can I just go to then how you went from rowing in an indoor gym? Now, I'm going to tell anyone who's listening this, right? So Jo and I are from a place in the UK that's on the coast of England. It's bloody cold. Even in the summer, you're not guaranteed to get a nice sunny day. But I mean, it's lovely and stuff. It rains a lot. It's quite windy. And so it's nice inside. But then to go from doing that to standing on a paddleboard across the Northeast waterways, which I don't truly understand actually, and I know the Northeast quite well. I don't know what the waterways were. So how do you tell me what the other waterways, but tell me how you actually got on the paddleboard, age what, 50?
51 I was. First lesson was 51 and did the trip 54. So I had injured my knee. And I'd gone away for a weekend and slipped and I'd injured my knee. So I was on crutches for quite a long time and my mood dropped. And I knew that, I wasn't out there just being active in my own little way. Because just to point out, Trevor, I don't consider myself in any way an athlete. I just move because it brings me joy. I just want to make people aware of that. And so I set myself a challenge as I kind of came off my crutches and the pain was easing, to spend 30 minutes every day outside doing some form of activity. And I called it Rain or Shine 30. And I started it the 1st of September, like I'm going back to school. And the first thing I did, other than walking, was to take a paddleboarding lesson. And I had been completely seeing it on Instagram, all these beautiful blue blue waters and sunny places. And I went up to the Lake District, which is sort of northwest of England, even rainier than the northeast where we go. And I just took my first paddleboarding lesson. I think I'd always wanted to be a surfer, but I always thought I was a bit northern and a bit chubby and a bit boring to be a surfer. So this seemed like a kind of in-between thing. And I just loved it. I just loved it, immediately loved it. And it was about a couple of, just maybe 5, 6, 7 weeks later, I thought I'm going to paddleboard coast to coast along the canal system, the Leeds, Liverpool Canal and River Aire and Colburn Navigation. I told somebody or a few people about it, but mainly one person, and his response was really boring, logistically difficult, and too complex for a woman of your age. So I then actually put that dream away for 3 years until I was...
Oh, no, some bloody fucking awful man explaining it to you.
Yeah, who doesn't paddleboard and who doesn't come from the north. So I had no idea. But, I'm not the most confident of people. And certainly at that time, I wasn't the most confident of people. And so I just went, you're probably right. I probably couldn't do it. So I put the dream away for 3 years, but carried on paddleboarding and really building my confidence and building the strength around my knee, which is what I needed to do. And in the meantime, and just in case this is relevant to your listeners, both my shoulders became frozen shoulders. And as they eased, the paddleboarding really helped. And I didn't know that was something that might happen at that time of life.
Honestly, it's crazy. Frozen shoulder, Achilles injuries, the hip injury. Yeah, I mean, it's just that this declining estrogen can just wreak havoc on us for a while. But the frozen shoulder, yes, I hear all the time. And what's so cool about paddleboarding is actually a lot of lat work, isn't it? And core work rather than shoulder, if you're doing it properly. But those areas completely support the shoulder structure and can really help with healing. So I paddleboard. I paddleboard because before I started swimming, and I started swimming because we've had that sort of online conversation. My husband was a pretty accomplished swimmer and would easily go out and do a 7-10K swim. And so I know, mad. And so we bought an inflatable paddleboard that was on sale for $500 instead of like $1,500. And it was brilliant. And so I would go next to him so that nobody hit him with a speedboat, because I was convinced he was going to go swimming and get hit by a boat. It's that whole Kirsty MacColl in the Proclaimers, it's how she dies. And I don't know why, but it always stays in my mind. And so I started paddleboarding with him then, did it all wrong, used to get exhausted in my arms because I didn't. Then I went for a lesson. Learned how to do it properly and learned that they move a lot, the paddle boards, like they can flip side to side without them actually collapsing, and that just gives you confidence when you understand what you're dealing with. And so it goes on my back, it's like a backpack, and we take that everywhere we go. And so I really like it, and people would say, oh, but paddleboarding's so boring, and I'd be like, no, it's not though. I mean, it's not an adrenaline fuel thing like surfing, which I've also done. It's not even comparable though. They're two totally different things. And I actually think that it's a ton of fun. I really, really like it. And so, but I've never considered, as soon as the water becomes a bit bumpy, I'm just like, oh, here we go. This is where I fall in. And the water has to be warm because I don't get this whole cold water thing. But you did the canals, which I assumed made you think, I could probably do this because it's canals. I'm assuming people know this, but there's lots of canals in the UK and they're very flat.
Yes.
So is that why you decided to do the canal? Yeah.
Yes. I'm quite like big journeys that I can chip away at. I don't need to be the fastest, the strongest, the fittest, but I can just chip away. I'm quite gritty and, northern, determined, just, get on with it. So I wanted, and also it meant that it was very, it's written about, it's very, you've got distances and places you stop and locks and things like that. So it was quite an organized kind of thing. Rather than going on the coast, you've got tidal systems and stuff like that. So 162 miles, 101 locks, a couple of hundred swing bridges, as coast to coast as you can get on the canal system. Yeah, it was an amazing journey. It changed my life, really. Changed my life.
So I want to get down to the nuts and bolts. That's the overview of it. That's sort of your a description of it. But I don't get even how you start to do this. Do you need permission? Because I think everywhere in the UK is full of rules. So did you get permission to do it on there? How did you like plan the day? If it's 162 miles, how many miles did you know you could do a day? Where did you get your lodgings from? I mean, did it take a long time to organize? Like how many hours a day did you paddle? And
yeah, it took a long time to have the courage to book the time off work and book bits of accommodation. Once I did that, but I procrastinated out of fear, really. And the reason I decided to do it in 2019 was, again, two reasons. One, my youngest son would be finishing his A-level, so end of high school, and he would be going off to university. And I didn't want to be that sort of Billy no mate, single mum, not having anything to do. So I needed this.
What now? Yeah, that what now thing. Yeah,
exactly. So I needed this big dream to pull me to the future. And the second thing was that I had lost a number of girlfriends in a very short space of time from different areas of my life, and only one of them had reached 50. And I just thought, life is so short and precious. One was a heart condition, the others were cancer. And I thought, life is so short and precious, it can turn in an instant. And if you've got this dream, whatever anyone else says, you owe it to yourself just to get to the start line. It doesn't matter if you don't finish it, but get to the start line. So once I'd made that commitment, yes, you need a license. British Canoeing or the Canal and River Trust can give you a license to go on the canals. 162 miles. I took time off work. I made it 10 days, including the weekends, and then gave myself a day's rest, and then went, right, I've got 10 days. I'll have to do 16 miles a day. Adds up to 162 miles. I'd never paddleboarded more than about 8 to 10 miles, so I had no idea what it was going to be like. And from day one, I was about 16 miles behind. So, because it rained and I hadn't
oh God, did you forget about the weather?
Yes, the northern weather, it just rained and rained and rained and rained and rained. And so it was very much a case of, I'm just going to do it. And I had a filmmaker in the end who decided to join me. And so Frit had a van, which was very helpful. But other than that, I booked lodgings along the way and organised a taxi if Brit hadn't been there to take me from the canal to the pub. Part of the canal comes through my hometown, so I'd arranged to sleep in my own bed for 4 nights, and a friend's daughter came and collected me from the canal, took me home, put the wash on, cleaned the kitchen floor, came back to the canal and did it like that. So it was a really simple way of showing you can have this extraordinary adventure and some nights sleep in your own bed, because I wanted to keep the costs low. And then
how long does it take to paddle 16 miles?
Well, I was picking up litter and fundraising and filming. So I could be on the water some days 8 hours, just because I was doing all those other things as well. If I had just focused on it, it would have been a lot shorter, maybe 5 hours. I'm not the fastest, but then you've got to get in and out with the locks, and then you're carrying all the litter and then stopping to chat, take photos, do social media. So yeah, if it was heads down, it would be a lot quicker. And then one day I paddled 24 miles, which was amazing. And I just really it was like, wow. That night I came into my hometown about 10:30 at night, sort of lit up by fairy lights and stuff. And it was just beautiful. And I've never paddled 24 miles since.
It will let you one and done. It's almost like the marathon, isn't it? So,
yeah, it is.
So you took this time off work, you decided to do this big dream. It's incredible. I'm actually so impressed. It's amazing. But then it wasn't enough just to do this for yourself. You decided to fundraise, and then you decided to become a womble. If anyone doesn't know what a womble is, they go around picking up litter. But then you got a filmmaker on board. So can you sort of say how that all came to be?
So Fritz just messaged me on Instagram, the power of social media. And yeah, we had met very briefly at a couple of events. And then when I announced that I was going to do it, Fritz messaged and said, would you like a filmmaker? And I thought, young filmmaker, started their career. They're going to spend 2 days with me and think this is just utterly boring. Some middle-aged woman picking up litter, yabbering on about the menopause and her children, just boring. And I thought, It'll be a couple of minutes, this film. It'll be a little bit of a roundup, something that a little film that I can sort of show on YouTube. And in the end, Fritz stayed with me for, 8 of the 11 days, had to go back to work in the middle. We made the film. It's been shown at all these festivals. And I often say, I don't think there's many adventure festivals where there's a film about menopause, but I talk about it really openly in the film. I talk about grief and being a single mum and loss and the menopause and that feeling of, what it feels like. And there's one time in the film where I go wrong and, I'm literally crying to camera about, what a fool I feel. And I think that ties into what can happen in the menopause. You just lose your confidence. And, people can see me literally struggling and thinking, can I do this? So, yeah, it seems to have touched. I think it's a bit like you. You're very honest, very vulnerable, very open about your experience. And that touches people because we don't always hear that side of things. And I guess that's what the film did. And
Right. There was the human element, the real element, right? Yeah. And it's amazing. And I mean, how do you ever top that though? I mean, you don't need to top it, of course.
No,
but it's set you on, it's a bit of a pun this, but it's set you on your own journey now, hasn't it? So from that time in that grief counselling where you had the analogy that you ended up living out, it was like a lifesaver for you. And you've written a book now.
Yes, best-selling book that's gone to reprint this week. So in 8 months, we've gone to reprint. So I'm writing another one about the Lake District, so the place where I learned to paddle. And I still have a very normal day job. And if you looked at me, you wouldn't think anything was different. I think it's the landscape within me has changed, that and my little daily habits. And I'm very much now feel like, what can I do to make sure that I have a healthy postmenopause and a healthy aging? And exercise has to be part of that. I'm not going to let that go.
It's the number one recommendation from all the health institutes over anything else. And but I think what you're saying to people and what I am hearing and it makes me so happy is that, as we age and we get older, we realize that exercise isn't about whether it's a sport or an athletic endeavor or whether it makes us thinner or whatever adjective we want to put on it. But really it's about how can we thrive and live our best life, especially post-menopause. And exercise is the one thing that stands above the rest as being the most effective thing to help us with longevity, to help fight all-cause mortality. And it's something that everyone can do from whatever level they're at. And you've sort of brought to the conversation and something new, like this whole paddleboarding thing is not typical, it's not conventional. So, if somebody is interested in doing something like this, is it like a ton of equipment? Because what's interesting for me is, I fair weather. I like to be warm. I think spending all that time in the Northeast, I'm like, and now I'm in Canada and it's -30 outside. But typically I like to be warm. And so, but you go out in all weathers and you have the full wetsuit and little boots on and stuff. So what do people need though? And how can they do this in an accessible way?
So it's not a huge amount of equipment, but safety has to be the priority. So say you have an inflatable board, you'd also have a leash which attaches you to your board, and more and more in the UK. I don't know about abroad, so that would be different, the US and Canada. But more and more we're leaning towards a quick release belt, which means that the leash attaches to a belt around your waist so that should you need to at some point be detached from your board, say in fast moving water, you just pull this and you're released. So a leash and a buoyancy aid, personal flotation device. And so they're really key. Obviously the board, the paddle, the leash and a buoyancy aid. And then the right kit for the water temperature. That's what you need to think about, the water temperature. So in the summer, yes, I might just wear leggings and a bit of a thinner top. But obviously now being in the north, I have what's called like a semi-dry suit, sort of pants and cagoule. And then I wear quite sturdy boots as well because I paddle on a river where there's rocks and things like that. So, and I also paddle on the sea. So, dressing for the water is really key. And because I live in the north, the water's generally going to be cold. So I yeah, even in the summer, I have a few layers on.
It's interesting because I see you wearing boots on your paddleboard.
Yeah.
And I was always confuses me because I'm like, oh my God, if you fall in, it's going to like weigh you down. I only do it in the summer. So I'm like in my swimmers and, barefoot, of course. But
yeah. They're really good boots, and that they don't, because I have my dry suit trousers have built-in socks, and then you wear these boots on top, and they're very specifically made for it. And somebody was asking me this actually on Facebook. He said, do they fill with water? And they really don't. I don't know how they make it, but they don't get clogging and heavy and pulling down. And they're built specifically. But should I fall off, and if I'm in a river and it starts moving, I can kind of look after myself, like swim defensively. So you lie on your back and you put your feet out, and your feet will hit the rock first. And so that's why I need the boots.
Yeah, and actually I remember that from canoeing at school. That's how they always taught us, put the oar between your legs and then feet first. Yeah.
So, but I mean, not so much on the sea, but yeah. Sorry.
Do you ever feel like doing some like how-to lessons for older women? Like I think that would be something that people might be interested in. I've done a couple of paddleboard lessons, and they're always like 20-year-old like fit chicks, which is fine. I mean, that's good, but it might be off-putting for some people. And when I do all those videos, a lot of women will try them because they're seeing a 52-year-old woman exercising, and they're like, well, I can try it then at least, right?
Yeah. I have thought about it, maybe once this next book is done, but also I've started writing for a paddleboarding magazine, and I'm going to start writing about paddleboarding in the menopause. Some of the things that the menopause can help you with. Some of the things that paddleboarding can help the menopause with, but also some of the things that, like in shoulder problems and things like that, how we can make sure that we look after ourselves, or maybe just make sure we're nourished and we have enough water. When I sometimes paddle with younger people, although we always say take snacks and water, I'm then making sure I'm completely fueled so I don't go a little bit, and they can just wing it with a packet of crisps. I know
protein bar or something, and you're there with your flask and your cup of tea and your hobnobs.
I've got the whole stuff going on. I've got enough protein going on here. So I will definitely be writing about that, because it is a great sport. I mean, it's, as you know, it's so good for your core. So, and I just think that's brilliant. I love the fact I'm kind of exercising my core without knowing that I'm exercising my core.
That's the best way. Like, it's because what it does, if people want to know from a physiological standpoint, is you have to learn to anti-rotate, which means to stop your body turning too much, and you have to resist that rotation. But then you've got to have like a functional connection to the lats at the back, and also the opposite glute. And so from a functional perspective, you're working in so much better way than you would if you were just doing crunches all day long. And how that translates over to real life is when people fall, they don't have the functional core strength to stop themselves falling over. And this is a great way to build that up. So I'm all about functional exercising, and this is one of those great ones for sure.
Yeah.
So
it is. And then carrying your board, my board is, I don't know how heavy, but it's fairly heavy with my board and my kit and my litter. I've always got a bag of litter.
Right, so how do you pick litter up? Tell me about that, right?
Well, I get told off because I pick it up with my hands. And other people are like, oh my God, you can't do that.
Why?
I had gloves and I sanitize and everything. But, like I was on the river yesterday, and there was obviously like an industrial bag that had got caught up in the branch. So I had to like pull at it and get it out. And the only way I could do that was really gripping it with my hands and then pulling and pulling and pulling. But then I sanitize and everything as well. I'm really careful about that. And then just put it in my bag. But, you're carrying your board, you're carrying your paddle, you've got your bag of litter. It's all strength training as well. And that's one of the things that I, sometimes think about. I haven't been paddleboarding for a while. I'm like, I need to up my strength again.
But do you feel strong? When you paddleboard?
Yeah. When I always say it makes me feel like a warrior, not a worrier. I feel like a warrior. And I think there's something about that, standing on a board, you've got your paddle. Something often, if I'm out with a friend or whatever, I'll take a photograph of them kind of holding their paddle up in the air. And it's a really warrior pose,
No, that's what I do. Every time I'm on and my husband says, do you want a photo? It's in both hands, and I'm like,
yeah, exactly.
Every time.
It's just such a warrior kind of person. Not many opportunities in life as a mum and a daughter and a friend that you get to be a warrior. You're just the person doing all the work.
And so do you go out, how often do you do this? How often do you get on the paddleboard?
I am really trying this year to try and, if I'm inland, it's easier than at the coast, because at the coast, obviously, that you've got the tides and stronger winds in the winter. But I'm trying to do it at least a couple of times a week and then more in the summer. Because last year, I don't know if you experienced this writing a book. I wrote the book and then I promoted the book, and I was spending all my time promoting the book and not actually doing the paddleboarding. And I sort of found that I could feel my mental health dipping. And so now I'm just like, no, even if it's just half an hour, get on the river, just paddle up and down, pick up litter, give yourself that chance. One of my words of the year is boundaries. And it's like saying, this is important and this, I want to do this. And so that's why I've done Couch to 5K, because it's like, well, if the river's too high or I can't get to the coast or the canal, I'll do something else that'll make me feel like I'm learning something. So yeah,
it's one of your non-negotiables, and I have a bunch of them. Yeah. And it's that idea of like prioritizing yourself first, so that everything else like that falls away from that benefits. Right. Yeah. It's amazing. Like, I think your story is truly inspiring. I think that I'm going to ask you this question because it's as an observer who obviously I'm English living in North America. I mean, how do you feel that women get portrayed in the UK going through menopause? Do you feel as though there's enough people like you saying, hey, it's not all over, you can do more? I mean, what's your general thoughts on?
So from what I see, I think it's great that more women are talking about it. Like I said, 10 years ago, very few were. And I literally was piecing it together backwards. I didn't know that joint pain or pain in my teeth or tinnitus or, itchy skin, I didn't know that any of that was, so I think it's really, really good. I think in the UK, if I'm honest, it can become a little bit polarized. As I say, it's either or. It's really awful and you have to take HRT. It's really awful and you have to do this. It's really, and it's become a little bit polarized. I'm not professionally involved. I'm just as an outsider looking, really. I do think that the common conversation needs to also embrace postmenopause. I listened to Jacqueline Booten, her garden gym, absolute, hero. She's just an amazing, wonderful role model of what it can, be to be an actor. And she's only a couple of years older than me, but clearly so much stronger and just a wonderful role model. And I think on her podcast, she said we have to move on from just talking about it's so important to talk about perimenopause and menopause, and it's not to deny that it can be awful, like it was for you and me, just broke us to pieces. But there is another part of the story that we don't always hear, which is that it can get better with the right treatment, the right help, and it can get better, and there's some good stuff afterwards, and they're the role models now that I'm looking for, like yourself, that there's some good stuff afterwards. And we need to keep, I think the thing is, once we're through the menopause, it's not like a done deal, that's it. We now have to think, how can I age well? What are the things that I can keep doing? Like I was listening, muscle and looking after my mum had osteoporosis. And I've always thought of my mum and her lymphoma, but actually that she died of a blood cancer, but she also had osteoporosis. And I'm thinking, God, I really need to make sure that I look after my bones, So there is a story post-menopause, and not so many people are talking about it. So I'm really glad that you do. And
yeah, I do, because I think that, like you say, I think people think it's a one and done, and I get why perimenopause gets the attention it does, because that's the most confusing and troublesome time, and that's when women typically need help if they're going to take it. But the idea that, well, first of all, it gets frustrating for me that I know women are scared to go into menopause because of some of the narratives, and that really upsets me, because we know that educating them and supporting them, it should be something that they can do. Well, of course, it's something they can do. I didn't even mean that. I mean, it's just something they shouldn't fear. And then when we get through the other side, if we know, I think the average number of years after menopause is 33.3 years, right? That's a long bloody time not to be taking charge of our health, not to be wanting the best in aging, right? And so I love now that there's all of these women in their 50s and 60s that are sort of pretty resilient and saying, you can, and even if you don't start till you're in your 60s, it's still fine, still good, right? Yeah.
Look at Joan, train with Joan, 70s.
Joan McDonald, and it's amazing, right? And I mean, she's like hardcore as well. Like she's probably working out more than some 20-year-olds. Doesn't even need to be like that, but we do need to like look at these people like John and Jacqueline and stuff and say, there's way more stuff left to do, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's it. I think one of your other podcasts where she talks about the quality of life, it's not just the length of our lives, it's that quality of life. I want to keep doing these things. I want to, go on big hikes on my own. I want to, carry my stuff on my back. I want to know that if I set up camp that I can handle everything. I want to go on paddleboarding trips. I want to swim. I want to do all these things, but I need to know that I can physically do them, because that physicalness gives you that confidence mentally too. And so, there is loads of stuff. And I work for a church, and I've worked with volunteers in their 60s, 70s and 80s. And for me, it is a lesson in how to live a good life. And, they're active and socially connected, which exercise can give you. They're learning all the time. And I want to be like them. I want to be like them. But then, they may also mention if they've had a fall and how it impact, they broke their wrist and didn't know that they might have osteoporosis, so it's a great lesson in how to live a full life. And I want that conversation to continue as well. For me, I want to keep doing good stuff and have role models like you around me that I can say,
well, same with
country skiing. I'd love to do that.
Yeah, that was fun, and I'll definitely do that again. But it's the same thing, and I think that, they're the voices I'm trying to amplify, right, for sure. And that's the headlines I want to see.
Yeah.
54-year-old woman does canal to canal in the UK. Yeah, that's what I want to be reading about, right? I don't want to be reading about us crumbling and almost not worth it. And so I think, though, that we are changing the narrative. And I think I did a post on Twitter the other day and said, this is like the first time in our known history where we've got the actual opportunity to decide how we talk about menopause.
Yeah.
So I'm on a particular path, and I am, and I'm the goblin northern girl, but I also don't mind being that, because I'm quite determined that we make women realize that they're capable and they can and they should, right? Yeah, that's where I think this goes from.
And we've devoted so much of our time to looking after other people that it is time. I'm still, like, my son is literally in Toronto right now. He just WhatsApped me as he's traveling. And I said, I'm speaking to somewhere in Toronto today. And, but he's got dreams and plans. And I want to go on them with him. But also, whilst he's doing that, I want to have something to do myself. I don't just want my life to be defined as being, it finishes when they left home. I want to go off and do stuff with them and have my own dreams as well, because we've just spent so much time giving. I mean, I still need to look after my dad, obviously, but, when the time comes. But there's so much out there. And I know that I'm lucky. I know that I came through the menopause, terrible, but got better. And I know for some women it is even harder. But there are lots of things that can get better and lots of hope out there too.
So, Jo, if anybody wants to find you, what's the best place to seek you out?
Probably on Instagram, where I am healthy, happy 50, so 50 at the end. So I'm 58 and I'm deciding, am I going to be healthy, happy 60, or am I going to go to Jo Moseley? And then my website is Jo Moseley, M-O-S, so JOMOSELEY.com. I'm on Twitter too, but mainly Instagram.
And can we find your video for the movie there?
Yes. Yeah. So that's on Vimeo. So that's probably, if you go to my Instagram or to my website, you can get the links to it. So you can, we didn't have any funding, so you can rent or buy it. And there's a little trailer which kind of gives you a flavor of Frit's brilliant filming and my crying.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Jo, I really appreciate you coming on today. That was a really great talk and uplifting and inspiring. And I'm hoping that this makes women listening to this go and get a paddleboard or go and put cross-country skis on or just try something new. And don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to take your time. Don't be afraid to fail.
No, exactly. Just start small, start where you are. Like, I'm starting Couch to 5K again, I'm starting again, third time ever.
Well, can I tell you, so am I.
Brilliant.
And I'm a runner. But I'm doing it with my son just because. Why not?
Exactly. Nobody's judging. Nobody is judging.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much. Take care. Bye.
Take care. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to the show. If you like what you hear, then why not subscribe to this podcast and leave me a review? You see, when you do this, it helps to raise the profile of my show and attract new listeners. And it also allows me to continue to deliver valuable content with great guests. And in return for you doing that, I will send you my 12-week core-focused program called Abs on Fire as a thank you. Simply drop me an email at amanda@amandathebe.com and I'll wing that your way. Bye.